Situationships.
So like, when does the character need to stop developing? Like,
when does a character reach their final arc?
when does the BS stop? Like,
Man, like, I feel like situationships is just the worst thing to ever like come to fruition, and all the other TikTok things like the 3-month rule,
the 6-month rule, the
6-month
the
rule.
orange peel. Like,
What is the orange? Wait, what's the orange pill?
Bro, they were like, oh, there was this girl. She was like, her boyfriend. It was literally a text message swiped through, and everybody started like making a thing out of it, like a situation, because it was like, oh, my boyfriend doesn't peel oranges for me anymore. He must hate me. He wants to break up.
Oh,
with me.
I remember that. That was so
like,
weird to
what
me.
is that? Like what
What
is?
is the orange pill?
It's the same thing as like dear pretty. Like what
What
is
is
dear
Oh,
pretty?
dear
Like,
pretty, bro.
what is dear pretty?
It gets to a point.
Topic. Situationships. Back onto that because I just hate them so much.
This guy can't get over them.
You're so right. Double entendre. I can't get over situationships.
Actually,
That did not. No.
Okay, what are we actually supposed to be talking about?
What?
Ham.
Ham.
Let's get back on hammock. Now, what gave birth? Here's the segue. Situationships had to come from somewhere.
had to come from.
They had to come from somewhere.
They had to come from like, not independence, but like a certain type of dependence that a lot of people like grow up with.
What that mean?
Like when you grow up with like so much dependence on other people, it's just like you have attachment issues, but at the same time you still can't be alone.
I feel that. I wonder if love was back this. No, love was not like this back then.
Oh yes, it definitely was.
But they did not have situations. They did not have situationships and 3-month rules back
Yes,
then.
they didn't have 3 months rules, but they had situationships where they had to where the girl had end up leaving a skedaddling because her daddy like paid off and got her married to some random.
That's like a different type of situationship, though.
Like what type?
It's like an actual situation that needs to be handled. If
You
you're
know
still
what the
getting
real
paid off.
situationships were?
Yes, and we will be able to segue into the main topic of today's podcast.
It's the
Have
most
y'all ever-
conspicuous name, so people won't click on it.
Have y'all ever, I know a lot of y'all are kids, because I'm presenting this to a class, or I'm presenting this to a teacher, so you definitely pay rent. Have you ever paid rent and been like, this is way too much money? It hasn't always been like that. What
I'm so mad at baby boomers for being able to buy a house for maybe like $200 and and now blaming the rest of us because we work just as hard as them, even more. And
Remember
then
when minimum wage, you could actually do something with that? Minimum wage not only used to be lower because people could live off of that, but it used to be like, okay, you work a minimum wage job, you work 2 minimum wage jobs, say a couple of years, you get your own house.
Literally.
You could pay rent. Or at least you could pay
They
for an
used to be
apartment.
able to just move from New York to Santa Fe, buy a house, and keep living.
People would take their...
Newsies reference, what is it? Illusion? So, the Newsies.
People would take their 70s Mustang, drive from New York to Chicago, take Route 66 all the way down to California, start a new life there, build generational wealth, and be perfectly fine.
Building a new life was so easy for them
It was
back
so
then.
easy.
And I just don't understand that.
This has nothing to do with Walt Whitman.
It actually does have a lot to do with Walt Whitman.
We're getting there from talking about society.
Because all of them, they had opinions on society like that as well.
They all thought things were easier back then.
Because they lived in a time that was easier back then,
They
and they
didn't
were
know
all
about-
white people.
They didn't know about easier back then until you're paying $2,000 for a 2-bedroom apartment with half a bathroom.
Half a bathroom is just
Easier back then. Now, I feel like Walt Whitman would definitely be worshipped now. Because so many people could just relate to his idea of what
just
society sucks. Why not just go into the forest? But yeah, people would definitely understand his point of view about how, one day, why do I have to pay rent when I could just move into the woods, build a house, fish, clean my own water.
It was so easy for them to build a house. Because you know what's even crazy to build a house? Now in the forest, you gotta register that house.
Facts.
You gotta register. You can't even live. You can't just go off grid because you have to be.
Everything's owned by somebody now.
Everything.
You just can't. You can never really be alone, honestly.
Truly, because they're just watching you. You cannot even live alone. It's so silly getting a job and having the silliest type of job, or it being in the silliest place, but yet you can still get fired for just the silliest reasons, or they're picky with how they choose.
Fired for anything.
Fired for literally anything. And it's so crazy because back then they didn't even need to have certain qualifications because they couldn't even get that type of qualifications. Well, and that's also because certain type of people are only allowed there too.
About at Pancake House?
No, but allowed to work. I'm talking about
Oh.
back in the day. Like,
Oh, you talking about way back when?
yeah, way back when.
Like,
Y'all know about the way back when in my time.
What are you?
All
like,
right.
of course,
Okay.
here he go with his arthritis knees. Like, come on, man.
Okay, but you don't want to talk. Your knees are literally worse than mine.
Nuh-uh.
On our American history. What's one thing we all are familiar with about American history?
Slavery.
You better have a topic. You better know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Slavery. Let's talk about it.
It's
Want to
not-
take it away, Mike?
Not even just about slavery, just like having the ability to live freely and have like certain ideas, but at the same time not being able to live freely.
Slaves
because
couldn't do that.
slaves couldn't do that, and women couldn't do that, and certain types. Hello. It's like not even just being able to live like freely. It's like the ability, like having to not be able to live freely because of how different you were, or because you were shunned. Like not even just slavery, just like being different. Like it was literally a crime to be different. Like
It was.
you literally had to go
And
back.
it was something you absolutely cannot control.
Exactly, because it's like the people that were controlling, they didn't even know how to control themselves because they were the epitome of different. Like it's so insane. Like the Salem witch trials, man.
Man, that was a time.
I think those I guarantee you one of those days, one of them priests that used to be talking like singing fire and brimstone and you're all going to hell. They used to be the main ones in the closet hiding something that they did or
Hiding something like a little kid.
hiding something like a little kid and a newborn child.
Specifically a boy.
Specifically a boy. You know, for how
like at the same time, like being different is like you had to like take yourself away from the madness at some point, which is like what women did, what Thoreau did, well, and then what Emily Dickinson did because
I'll
she
be right
used
back.
I'll cover the
She
camera
was-
while you keep talking.
she was a nature
You need to
freak.
cover the camera.
Like she was a nature freak too, but it was just like
whoa, nature freak. Cool.
not Dickinson.
Oh, we're on topic now.
Me, I was.
Oh, it turned off. She was a nature freak, but she enjoyed being alone in nature as well.
Yeah, but she obviously was very much into the idea
It's
of
like-
nature.
Like looking at nature and society, it's like all of them, like Hawthorne, Dickinson, Whitman, Thoreau. They just showed a bunch of different perspectives of like human life, and they just opened up about their different, like about them being different and how life is different and why it's different and why it's that way. And they really emphasize that, like sometimes being in nature, just being in the fray of society too.
And also, they were all like loners. They were all loners. Like Emily Dickinson, whole life in a room. Whitman, smoking a mysterious thing in the grass, trying to be in the clouds, double entendre.
Speaking with the Eagles.
Speaking with the Eagles. Thoreau, Thoreau disappeared for 2 years. He was a Harvard student, wanting to see what life was really like. And where's Thoreau, Whitman? We're missing someone.
Hawthorne, I don't know too much about Hawthorne. Hawthorne was more like he observed it, but he also wanted to write about it too. Like actually I take that
Hawthorne
back.
was Black Veil, wasn't he?
Yeah. He was-
Interesting.
He had a lot of abstract ideas.
He definitely presented. Oh yeah, he did present individuality in the abstract way.
Mm-hmm.
I
'Cause, like,
never
think
thought
about
about
it,
it like
like,
that.
In the ministers, like think in society in
Let
general.
me get this mic over here.
In the minister's Black Veil, like they use like that minister got kind of like publicly exiled, but at the same time he still lived there.
he still got exiled.
Because they treated him differently, even though he still lived in society. And
Right.
just because
He didn't
of
even
it,
have to leave society.
He didn't even have to leave. They treated him differently from the day he started wearing that veil because it was like they were afraid of what it symbolized more than what it was.
Yeah.
Because I feel like some people in that town had skeletons in the closet, and then not even having skeletons in the closet, just about what other people think. He literally lost his fiance over what other people thought.
I guess that's just because like overall throughout history, society has just been like scared.
Yeah.
Scared of breaking the norm because breaking the norm is usually something bad,
They're
right?
afraid of being different, and that's
Afraid of being different.
That's literally the building blocks of racism against everybody, and just
I mean, it makes sense too. if you think society is a living entity, it's like everybody in it, a bunch of cells that make up a person. Like hypothetically, if all the cells in your body are going to operate the same, right? So all the people in the society are going to at least have the same right and wrong. It's the same basic understanding and basic morals. So if you have a cell in your body that starts acting different, what do all your other cells start to do?
Start acting different.
No, I was gonna say like they start attacking it.
Oh yeah, that too. Because that's how they handle viruses.
Yeah, like say a cell is acting weird, a cell is acting different. They go out to get that cell out the way. And if you're a part of a society, you're a part of a town, you're a part of a city, and you start moving strange,
or you start thinking different.
You don't even have to start moving different. All dude was doing was wearing a black veil.
Literally.
If you start thinking different, you're out. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like
it's literally what Emily Dickinson was talking about in March Madness in a sense. Because what is sense and what is madness? Like, who decides that?
Right.
I think it's like it's really necessary not to be in contact with the same people all over the entire time of your life, because there's no room for you to grow. Oh my gosh, it was in Mean Girls. This is like a Mean Girls illusion. I think this is important because there's no room for growth. Like, they all grew up, like they started out high school with like the plastics as being these rulers, and they just like just staying in this little bubble. Like, they all stayed in the same roles. Every clique was the same. They all came up with the same people, but they stayed in their same groups. But they didn't venture out of it, which eventually led to the downfall of the cliques. Not all the cliques, but mostly like the plastics, because they didn't grow out of themselves. So when they had like situations where they had to have a different perspective than the one they grew up in, that one that they were like growing in, they didn't, because they had stayed in that situation. There was no push
people
off.
Carry that mindset on their whole life too.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in high school I played football, or in high school all the boys wanted me. Like,
remember in high school
I
when I ran that 80-yard
yeah,
touchdown?
Like, people hang on to their old self and like their small circle.
And it's the same thing in college. Like, even if they grow out of their high school mindset, like in college I was this, that, and the third.
Yeah.
In college I was this, that, and the third. Or in college I was this, and that. I was miss this,
like,
on this. So
when you get out of college, okay, you go to college, 18, 19 years old. You get out, you're 22, 23, 25. You're still really young. Your brain just developed. You have your whole life ahead of you.
Yeah, but I feel like when it comes to like that whole friend situation, you grow out of people. Like, you're
really
working on your own individual self. Like,
but at the
you're
same,
like prospering as that amongst the society, and you're building your own like character, and
like
your character is coming through these experiences. And sometimes when you're friends with somebody, y'all might both like go down a different path that separates y'all. That's why I feel like it's okay to let go of people, but you don't have to.
It's okay to let go.
You don't have to let go of them in like bad spirits. Like, y'all can still be cool with each other, but y'all don't have to keep it up with each other.
Because they gonna be growing too.
Exactly.
They still gonna be growing. It's just y'all not growing in the same. Y'all both plants, right?
Y'all your own individual people.
Yeah, like, except y'all both growing towards the sun, but plant number one's growing straight up. Plant number two is like
might be a little curly on the way up
to the side, curling a little bit. It's a little shorter on your way up, but y'all still going the same way. Y'all still both growing.
And it's good to remember like the good times y'all had when you were younger. But the problem starts when you try to keep yourself in that same bubble or box
idea
that you stop.
When you
that
don't
you're
let
supposed to be
yourself
growing
grow.
out. Like, when you don't let yourself grow and you keep yourself in that same bubble.
Go crazy.
Because that just leads into like individualism and how it's what people secretly fear. Like, some people, when they really don't know it, like when they really truly don't know it, they fear growing up. They fear getting older. They fear having something different going with their lives where they lose what they have that they're comfortable in. Which is why people can't have that idea where they can't function without a certain type of norm.
Right.
And so that kind of just leads into why people just don't like things that are different, because of the fact that they can't see themselves outside of the box that they keep themselves in purposely, that they're constantly like pushing out of. It's like when water overflows, right?
Right.
It's like you keep trying to keep the water down, but it's still coming out.
Right. Bad.
Okay.
Right. I also feel like
I'll be back when y'all want to finish, probably.
kind of like around like, you know, the thing we've been discussing recently with like all the wall women is, you know, is like he talks about how he celebrates himself, but in his like in the a child, what is it? A child
said, "What is the grass?"
A child said, "What is the grass?" He kind of talked about like, what is it? like how he wished he could understand the people of his past, and how like he kind of says everything is built around the experiences of the old, but it's being built by the experiences of the new.
Right.
So like in a sense, I feel like yeah,
Foundations of yourself, but still being kind of like in that little pot. Like still think of like a plant. Like think of a plant growing in like a little purple pot.
Mhm.
So like the plant is sprouting and it's growing out of that pot and it starts to turn green. But its flowers are still purple because there's still hints of that purple pot there. But it's still growing out. But there's like a recurring cycle and it keeps recurring because it's like it just keeps cycling through. It's the same thing over and over again. Like everybody has like a certain moment where they have to discover themselves and have to live that life. But it's really interesting because sometimes it's really necessary to be able to define yourself and like who you are without other influences and still being that purple flower that you once were, but at the same time still sprouting up green. Because like Emily Dickinson and Hawthorne kind of put on that because they kind of talk about how like in Emily Dickinson's like the soul selects her own society, she's still selecting people that she wants around her, but she has to select certain people because she has to grow out of a certain type of thing. She's choosing people that she can grow with, that she can grow out of eventually, possibly too, and that she can move and sprout with too.
right. I feel like she kind of like sets her own boundaries in that sense. Like she knows who like she needs in her life that'll be healthy and beneficial, while she kind of like exonerates the people that she doesn't really like feel are necessary. She like kind of like just like waves them away, pushes them to the side. Like I feel like the acceptance of her soul is more of like her accepting herself rather than accepting the people, and like the people that she does accept is her like really speaking for her own like health. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, like in Hawthorne's thing like this, the minister's black veil, he doesn't have that arc where he can select other people for himself because he's just to himself until he dies because of that black veil. But at the same time, he uses that black veil like religiously. He uses that black veil because in the religious context, he's talking about how everybody has that black veil and it'll be revealed when it comes to Judgment Day, like in Christian beliefs, when it comes to when God judges you for all the sins in your life. And even if you've repented or if you've not, but everybody still has that black veil because not everybody knows what everybody's done. And only you and God know what's in your sins or what you've done and how you've lived your life. So it's kind of like he didn't have that opportunity to choose other people for his own like society or like putting like for himself to grow, but he still grew in himself and in God as well. And so he used that black veil, even though he kind of lived his life sadly. Like he was on his grounds and he was stuck where he wanted to be because he was still growing. But he was sad. He was sad. He was really barely able to grow out of that sadness because he still wanted the best for the townspeople. But he was able to grow with that black veil because he still did what he did. He still was a good minister. He still blessed the people. He still blessed people in their dying beds. He still preached every like Sunday when it was his turn. Even with that black veil on, and even with the outward perception of like his black veil and what it meant for other people, he stayed true to himself and he stayed true to his individualism and he kept growing. He kept evolving even with that black veil, and to his dying day, he was just like, no, I'm not gonna take it off because like, what was the quote?
I know what you're talking about. Okay.
It was like, I can't remember the quote because I put it in here. I think I need to put it on.
Let me sidetrack there real quick. I feel like Hawthorne's like story of the Black Veil was like the perfect tie between individuality, society, and nature. Mm-hmm. Specifically like human nature rather than like nature in the context of like plant life and stuff.
Yeah, because
they had that human nature of like how we will judge someone who like we know about, but like we won't allow ourselves to be judged. Like we're kind of like scared of that. And he like, in a sense, like he separated himself from society by wearing that black veil, but not purposely. It was just in the sense that everybody judged him.
He was doing it for them, but at the same, like they took it wrong, but he was still doing it for them. Like he never changed. Right.
Like he wore that veil, and that veil. I also feel like that veil scared others as it reflected something of themselves that they had not yet perceived. Mm-hmm. Like they finally had a chance to like reflect on their sins and they feared it.
They were scared.
Hawthorne, as Mr. Hooper, he himself is the individual amongst the society, and we're visiting human nature throughout this entire story.
Right.
Because even in the beginning, he wearing that black veil. At first, it's normal because of the circumstance, but the second the circumstance changes to the polar opposite.
Because they were with it. They were with it for a sermon. They were going to take that sermon and they were going to go home, and maybe some of them were going to change. They were going to take it and live with that conviction and not change at all.
Right.
Or some of them were going to take that conviction and change, and they were like, okay, I'm cool with it for a sermon. But once it became an everyday thing, it was like the talk of the town. It was what it was. It was just it was not the norm. It was the norm to be afraid of it.
Right. I feel like it also became a thing of like everybody accepting that same belief. Like nobody really like the only person that didn't do it was somebody that actually understood like Hooper before like he started wearing the black veil.
But then even at the same time, she still didn't understand. Like she probably wasn't very much of an. She still wasn't coming out of that. Coming back to my purple pot. I'm staying on my purple pot. Like she wasn't that much. She wasn't growing that much out of her purple pot because even though she grew up a little bit out of it, like she sprouted her green and she knew his green at the same time, she was still afraid. She was still less sprouted because she was afraid of what society would think of him, and she wasn't able to within herself just stay with him throughout the entire thing because she was afraid of what other people would talk about. And so it kind of showed her individualism and how she felt and how she was afraid. She was afraid of society like shunning her like they were shunning him. But she wasn't able to be okay with that in her own self because I feel like maybe she had some other problems. We don't get to know much about her, but it was like he literally was like, this is not forever. This is not forever. And when he means that, he means like in the afterlife when they're in the kingdom of heaven when they're dead. But at the same time, she didn't realize that, and she had to look within herself, and she still looked within herself, and she kind of didn't sprout out of her purple pot as much because it was a moment for her to grow. And it was a moment for her to be like, I don't care what society thinks of me. I'm who I am. I know who I am. I know who this person is, who I supposedly love. And I'm going to grow with him and grow with God and grow in myself and be like by his side as we grow together. But she kind of stumped herself when she made that choice.
You know, in that sense of like society not understanding an individual, I feel like Walt Whitman kind of focused on the opposite, and the individual not understanding society.
Sure.
You remember in his story about like the great heroes, he flew through like all of their experiences, and of course you can't say that he specifically understood them himself because he was simply like reaching for how he assumed they would feel,
right.
and like trauma and PTSD that had occurred between them. But he's also kind of like giving you this like sense of like you shouldn't speak of other people's jobs, tasks, and lives unless you have lived through it personally yourself.
Right.
Like you can't really talk amongst someone or like a group of people. You can't talk about other people without really like understanding them and like knowing their full story.
Right.
That's what I feel like Walt Whitman kind of I feel like focused on like everything. Like he grabbed the understanding of individuality in his first story, the I celebrate myself, I sing to myself. Because in the literal start, he talks about how he owns himself. He knows he's his own person. He celebrates himself and everything, right? Mm-hmm. And then in the next one, he talks about how society is kind of built off of yourself, but it's also surrounding like the other people that are kind of involved in life, like ancestors and like people prior, history, right? We're built around the history. Then in that story, he proceeds to talk about how we have to understand our society. But we can't judge people without understanding them, and we'll never truly understand them because we aren't them.
Right.
But I feel like that's really like important to focus on when we're talking about a sense of like understanding the individual. We must also understand society and circumstances that everybody lives through.
Right.
So like we can't judge others without being able to judge ourselves, but we can't judge ourselves without being able to judge others. I feel like it's all about like a reflection of one's personality through like understanding.
Yeah, it's like a reflection through a reflection.
Right. It's kind of like those infinite mirrors that like. Okay, so we kind of talked about like we talked about Hawthorne for a while and like his separation from like society and how he was like his own individual, but the society judged that individual for being different, mainly because of like human nature of like when somebody is like an outcast, everybody kind of like goes to judge them without understanding them. But like we also talked about how like the woman, I don't remember her
Dickinson?
name. No, not Dickinson. The woman that was like in the story that was with Hooper had like this.
Like his wife.
It might have been, or like a close friend, something like that.
Like the
right?
person who cut him off because of the veil.
Person that cut him off because of the veil, because he wouldn't show.
Yeah,
like she was willing to grow with him, but she couldn't, and she like stunted her growth because she was scared of what others might think of Hooper due to the veil and what they might say.
Right.
And we also elaborated amongst the kind of like how I feel like Whitman kind of focused on the opposite. Like in his first one, he celebrates himself, he sings himself, and he knows he owns himself. He's his own individual. In the second one, he focuses on like
She went in the bath?
Huh?
She went in the bath?
She went in the water.
Oh.
It's the sink. It's
Yeah,
right
your
there.
water's really strong.
Okay,
Come
but
on, boy.
no. So then we feel like the second one kind of focused on like how an individual is amongst society and how the past of our ancestors and history of society builds amongst us, but we formulate the new future as our own. We formulate our own future as our own individual, but around society, who also like influences our decisions and stuff, right?
Right.
As he says, he wants to like understand, like kind of what, like he wants to understand like the old men, the young children, and stuff like that, right? But and then we grabbed his last story, which is basically how we will judge a group of people, or like a certain like we'll judge a group of people without, or people in general without understanding their experiences and whatnot, and kind of like perceive it on our own without actually understanding their story and their perspective. But we can never really truly understand their perspective because we're not them.
Right.
So I feel like they, like Hawthorne and Whitman, kind of had like these not, I don't want to say like opposite views, but they both focused on a different type of view. Like they focused on the opposite, like they reversed the roles in a sense. Because Whitman had this like, he tried to see like
This
you remember he said he experienced like
he experienced these heroes and what they went through and their quarrels.
right. And then in Hawthorne, it's like everybody's judging that one person because he decided to wear a veil, which reflected everybody else's sins, which I feel like was a sense of like it was like our human nature, right? Because we don't like confrontation. Like nobody in this world likes confrontation. Truthfully, confrontation is without doubt scary. Like you can't walk up to someone and like get mad at them for something they said about you, unless you really are, like,
Unless you're at your tipping point.
like yeah, you have to be like on the breaking, like the loose end.
You want to get back in?
Yeah.
And then yeah, so like that was like kind of what we talked about. So we feel like they kind of reflected him, or like deflected him, I should say. They deflected him because he reflected them.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. They saw themselves in him.
Yeah.
The infinite mirrors thing.
Grab this mic so it looks fake.
Okay.
I'm gonna
So nature.
So, walking through
Walk
nature.
Through nature.
Ever like
Living in nature. Being.
Human nature.
Being nature.
shout out Michael Jackson.
Can be seen as a lot of different things. We have human nature, animal nature.
Society contributes a lot to nature. So does our individualism.
Absolutely.
It's like without nature, who are we? How do we conclude our lives? How do we grow? But at the same time, we have to be able to like use that in the best way possible to grow instead of stumping ourselves, like a tree stump.
Okay.
Okay.
Other thing was, you ever like walk through nature and like you think to yourself, you know, this is very calming. Like I'm not tripping when I say, like, you ever like take a walk and be like, I kind of needed this, not in like a Drake way, like I needed this, but like
don't know which one you're talking about.
like okay, you're stressed, you take a walk, right? Or like you sit on, you have a beautiful backyard, you sit on your porch and you like just stare out. You ever done that before?
I do very often.
I do this.
I don't know what it is about
On my
nature
porch.
that's just I don't know what it is about nature that's just so pretty, or like why humans appeal to it so much, but there's definitely something there. I don't know. Maybe just being alone in the woods is all you really need.
Maybe sometimes
You would like to catch me alone in the woods.
maybe sometimes it's like it's good to have that crazy like infinite reflection that we talked about before. It's good to like have that idea to like just look at yourself sometimes, and it's like, what do you fear? What do you secretly fear?
It really.
What do you think?
Sorry.
Speaking of that nature, I feel like it is human nature to have a strong fear. No matter what it is, there's always something you're scared of. Even if it's in the situational moment, or if it's like something entirety, like death, you're scared of that. But like situation, maybe if your mom's like mad at you, or in the sense of what we've been reading about,
It's changed.
Hawthorne, his like not Hawthorne. Well, Hawthorne's writing, but
All of them.
Hooper didn't have a fear, but the fear of others surrounding him, in which he was scared of everyone. Well, more like they were scared of him and what he like represented.
And it's like what Emily Dickinson was talking about. It's like the fear of change. It's like the fear of change, or the fear of things changing because of change.
Right. Also, I don't know if I'm just insane or something, but I've never actually felt alone, like surrounded by greenery.
Because you're not alone. It's like what was that guy's name? Thoreau. What he was talking about.
Like, you're still you. You still have the individuality of a human, that the soul of a human, but you don't feel like you're just there in nothing. Like you're just brain rot. Like you're just rotting in your bed and you're
like
not surrounded by
like
anything.
your difference is embraced in nature sometimes.
There's
You're
times,
still surrounded by life.
there's times where I feel like when I'm surrounded by nature, I have a clearer and more open mind, and like the sense that I know I'm alone, but I'm not lonely.
Yeah.
Like I can finally like truth. It's like when they talk about shower thoughts, but like being with nature instead.
Yeah.
You can actually like have a joy for life.
I have my shower thoughts in nature.
It's really interesting how the majority of these authors, they found their main ideas and their main like points of all the stories that we talked about in nature, of how like, and that's how they concluded their ideas there.
All right, this is such a crazy pull, but I feel like when I be seeing like the sunrise, sunset, crazy pull, John Cena on Kai's podcast or like talk, right? He talked about how he saw this, like he would think about the sunrise and how he would earn that. I feel like in a sense I look at the sunrise and I'm grateful that I found the sunrise. You know what I mean? Kind of in a sense that like it came, I've got to see it another day.
Right.
Like I feel like I'm joyed by that fact of like the sunrise. And like a sense, I also feel like there's different ways that could represent, like in the sense of seeing the sunrise. It's like a understanding of my luck of still being alive, as others may have lost their lives that same day. And like in Whitman's, he talks about the grass and how grass can represent a new growth of life, and how like there's truly never no death, as each death gives to new life.
Right.
It's like a preservation of life, or like a conservation law, right? And I feel like when we connect with like nature and whatnot, we get like this truthful understanding
Oh my gosh.
of like ourselves.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but that's like I just had a great brain fart through all of their through all of like society, like their uses of society's like points about being different, like changing, and how society is like it contributes to what people secretly fear and how people handle things that they secretly fear, and at the same time how like it's good to be an individual and growing into your individualism and growing out of that purple pot that I so heavily like attach myself to in this topic, like growing out of that purple pot, but then at the same time being able to either growing in that purple pot or still staying in that purple pot. At the end of the day, you're still going, it's gonna just be a cycle. It's gonna go through, and people are gonna have that same, like, they're gonna have these same ideals, and they're gonna have these same problems and ideas and growth topics that they have to use to become who they are and just develop themselves in nature and in society.
You know, in that Emily Dickinson, this is kind of like slightly off topic, but kind of on it. In Emily Dickinson, when she talked about how her soul was properly selecting what it like wanted and whatnot, I felt like it was like, you know, it was kind of like human nature of its own to place herself ahead of others and to understand that her self-worth is more than like what others may think or process about her. Right. And I also agree with that for the like majority of these other authors and poets. Like Whitman, he talked about how he celebrated himself. I always come back to this. He talks about how he celebrated himself, and he praised himself, and he owned himself, and how he thinks everybody else should.
And how also everybody's the same, like they bleed the same, they act the same, but they bleed the same, they are the same, like their beard. It's like the beard thing. It's like I can't remember the exact quote to paraphrase, but it's like the beard things where he was like, "You're the same, I'm the same, we're all the same at the end of the day."
Right, I agree.
Relating to his beard?
No, I can't find it. What's the actual
I know
quote?
what quote you're talking about. The one where he's like, just because y'all judge me doesn't mean y'all are any different or something like that. That was basically like the overall quote. He was basically saying that just because they were judging him doesn't mean that they were any different from him. And like the reason he wore the veil, like him wearing the veil didn't make him different from everybody else. It just showed that he had like a confrontation with his own like sins. Yeah, like he was like willingly open, like he was openly like showing his conflict amongst himself. And I also feel like it was like like I feel like the human nature kind of falls within the society, which falls into individuality. Like you have individuals amongst the society, and we all share a similar human nature, no matter how you put it. We all have that like a guilty conscience, but some of us choose to like express our emotions and like conflict with our emotions, but we're all scared of that confliction no matter what it is. And like we also have this prioritization of ourselves, which I feel like is constantly shown, especially in these when we had this sense of like this ideology of individualism, how everybody is always representing their individualism. You needed individuals to build a society nonetheless.
Right. What were we talking about in the beginning? Situationships?
Situationships.
We are not bringing back situations.
Yes, we're bringing back situationships.
Let's bring back situationships.
Just like those situationships at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Our human nature, society,
Mm-hmm.
our individualism,
Yep.
they truly contribute to how we handle our entire life and how we grow as individuals and how we use the nature and our human nature that we live in and the same nature that we grow in to just develop as people and create the society that we kind of want. You have to use